Everyone, and thank you for joining us here this evening, and welcome to the Workmen's Club. We thank you for opening up this venue for an important discussion. Tonight is all about getting to know all about the 2022 throne speech by the Bermuda government, and so we want to welcome, of course, the Premier, the Honorable and Minister of Finance, E. David Burt. We also have the Minister of Health, Kim Wilson, and we also have the Minister of Education, the Honorable Minister Diallo Robin. And to all of you, warm welcome. And to all of you tuning in online, watching us on CITV, the YouTube page, and the Facebook, welcome to you as well. And this is a discussion, this is very important, and when it comes to the throne speech, it's a set of initiatives that we look forward to in the upcoming year. And we want to use this time to really maximize the time to understand and to dive a little bit deeper into all of the different topics. And so the format is going to be, we're going to have a very cool video for you to watch in case you didn't make it to the throne speech, or you didn't get to read the document in full. We're going to catch you up to speed on that. And then we're going to have a discussion as well as have some time for all of you here to ask some questions as well. But a couple of housekeeping rules. We definitely want to keep our questions till about 2 minutes when we have that Q&A. And we also want to just be mindful that we want to cover as many topics as possible. So what's important to me and what's important to you and what's important to you might differ, and we just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to understand, again, what is within the throne speech for the upcoming year. So with that being said, again, welcome. We're going to cover so much important information, and we're going to leave this place better informed as citizens of Bermuda. So with that being said, just make sure that your cell phones are off, and let's roll the video, and then we'll get to some exciting community conversations.
The government will advance a bill to create a Department of Labour, giving statutory authority to posts within the department to ensure that workers' rights are protected and employers have certainty in the application of Bermuda's labour legislation. The government will deliver on that promise with the tabling of an order to prescribe a minimum hourly wage rate for Bermuda pursuant to Section 11 of the Employment Wage Commission Act 2019. The professional registration process for health professionals will be streamlined as the Bermuda Health Council transfers its systems to a blockchain-backed online platform. There are many aspects of healthcare reform that will take time to implement. However, during this session, legislation will be advanced to support data collection as a necessary first step for the introduction of controls around medical co-payments required of the most vulnerable. Bermuda's children present the most precious opportunity for the continued success of our homeland. A child's earliest years, from gestation through to the age of 2, are the most formative and vulnerable periods of life. These years feature intense brain development, the formation of first relationships, and the definition of the psyche. Experiences during this critical period can not only impact the health of the child, but often set the trajectory for health and wellness for life. The government will therefore introduce a First 1,000 Days initiative a pathway that will provide the foundation leading to a healthy life. The reform of public education remains the government's greatest priority. The progress to date has been realised despite the enormity of the task, and in this session the legislature will consider amendments to the Education Act 1996 to establish P7 and P8 classes to support the opening of parish primary schools at Francis Patten Primary School and Purvis Primary School. The Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service are Bermuda's first responders, covering the island with EMT expertise, firefighter capability and specialist operations in support of critical infrastructure. To ensure the freshest approach to fitness for role, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services will be invited to conduct a review of the service, the first since 2010. The legislature will be invited to take note of that review and its recommendations. The government's role is to provide the legislation that will support a tourism recovery, and as such, in this session, the legislature will take under consideration amendments to the Tourism Investment Act 2017 to permit the government greater discretion in the grant of relief under the Act to developers and those investing in attractions, restaurants and hotels. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Deputy Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the world has borne witness to the impact of climate change. Much of the biodiversity of the world's oceans exists within island communities like Bermuda. Small island states must continue to safeguard the environment and adopt measures to mitigate these impacts. The government will continue to prioritise the improvement of Bermuda's infrastructure. The completion of Phase 1 of the Water and Sewage Infrastructure Master Plan in March 2023 will see the installation of a new sewage treatment system, water production facilities and the associated distribution system. During this session, the legislature will be invited to consider a national electric vehicle policy and strategy for Bermuda, which will set out a plan to phase out the sale and importation of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035.
To meet the challenges that confront Bermuda, the government has set out a clear legislative path that touches all aspects of our society.
The health and well-being of our people of Bermuda remains a priority for this government.
This government's commitment to Bermuda's children and young people hasn't changed.
The government has already demonstrated its commitment to providing support and assistance to the people of Bermuda in mitigating the impact of rising global inflation. The measures of which were outlined previously, which were passed in the last session in regarding the duty reductions for essential goods, have been brought into force.
During the upcoming session, the government will also introduce pesticide safety regulations under the Pesticide Safety Act 2009 to reduce cancer risk.
As we have been clear from the beginning, the goal of education reform is to reorient the Department of Education to be even more nurturing and empowering in order to sustain the transformation of our schools.
Support for our future children is support for our future Bermuda. But babies cannot speak for themselves during this period of critical development, so we will work with parents, caregivers, families, and educators to give every child the best start in life.
The Ministry of Finance has worked with Quangos to achieve better financial accountability and ensure that these entities are operating in as cost-effective a manner as possible.
The formation of an education authority has always been part of the government's education reform. The key element of any education reform is establishing system governance arrangements that are fit for purpose and fit for the future.
Significant work has been done to advance the government's commitments to reduce interest rates and to address issues related to bank fees as outlined in previous throne speeches.
Universal health coverage continues to be a key objective for the ministry and for Bermuda, and we recognize that many aspects of healthcare reform will take time to implement. However, during this session, legislation will be advanced to support data collection as a necessary first step for introducing controls around medical co-payments required for those in our population that are most vulnerable.
As highlighted already, this government recognized the importance of ensuring effectiveness and efficiency as part of its fiscal and economic strategy. However, it is realized that further streamlining is necessary to enhance Bermuda's competitiveness and promote greater efficiency under the Companies Act 1981. As licensing and regulatory requirements in other areas have been put into place or strengthened, there has been limited evaluation of the related corporate approvals that are under the Companies Act to determine if they are still relevant or required. A detailed review of the Companies Act and the permissions that are required by the Minister of Finance under the Companies Act has been completed. Specifically, the need for continued ministerial approval for proposed actions and transactions. Steps are being taken to progress a critical aspect of this reform, which will reflect this government's commitment to a fairer, more equitable society and bring Bermuda's social insurance system in line with other countries around the world. In relation to social insurance contributions, it is intended that contributions will be changed from the current fixed rate for all persons, regardless of income, to one that mirrors other countries in the world where social insurance contributions are paid as a percentage of earnings. The effect of this change would be to increase the take-home pay of low-wage earners, while having high-wage earners pay more into the fund.
The History and Legacy Working Group was formed with the remit to provide a report on how we can record and preserve the rich and powerful history of education in Bermuda.
The recently announced Mortgage Guarantee Program is an initiative which allows eligible persons to get discounted mortgage rates on the basis of a portion of their mortgage being supported by a government guarantee.
With everything that happened with the throne speech, I want to say thank you to those that were responsible for putting together that nice intro video. Also, in the beginning, I forgot to, say good evening to our MPs sitting up front, also our media who is here in the back, and if you're watching, the view from here is beautiful. This is a real representation of the community. I think I see just about every walk of life and multi-generations from the school kids up front, in the front row, to the very back. So again, good evening to everyone, and this is an exciting opportunity to get more in-depth, information when it comes to the throne speech. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually jump around. So I don't want to stick to the premier or one particular minister for too long. We don't want to ice anyone. And so if it seems like we're jumping around, that's why we're doing that. But I'll begin with the actual process and the importance of the throne speech. I actually spent a few years when I was younger in the U.S. growing up. And in the U.S., they have the State of the Union every year. And I still watch it. I look forward to it. The president stands up and gives sort of a pulse as to how the country is doing, and then proceeds to outline the objectives ahead. So Premier, in your words, why, regardless of who is the government of the day, this is something that we do every year. And in your words, why is this, beyond the pomp and circumstance, why is this important?
Well, Kian, thank you certainly for the question. And I just want to say before I answer, I just want to say it's so great to see so many people out here this evening. Certainly, I'm looking forward to the conversation, looking forward to enlighten persons this evening and to share the plans that the government has going forward. On this, the throne speech is a tradition in Westminster Parliament, and this is at the beginning of every legislative session. I would say that it is certainly distinctly different from a State of the Union address, which is more of a political speech. Throne speeches are not supposed to be political speeches. Throne speeches are given by the apolitical head of state, whether it's the monarch in the United Kingdom or whether it is the governor generals or other persons in the various Commonwealth realms. And that speech is to lay out the government's legislative priorities for the year. It's important to note that there are many things that governments can do that do not require legislation. But what we lay out every time we do a throne speech are the specific bills that we bring into Parliament to make changes to the laws of which are going to be in place. And I think that's the distinct difference. Over time, these speeches have been gotten progressively longer. In the 90s, these speeches would not last for more than 10 minutes. It was more of the pomp and ceremony. I mean, in the United Kingdom, the speech I don't think is ever longer than 10 minutes. It's very rare to see it that long. And so over time, these speeches have gotten longer. They become more of a State of the Union and less of that. And the decision that was made after the 2020 election, our first reconvening, was to bring it back to where it was, to make sure that it was a lot more slim, more basic, and touched on mainly the legislative initiatives. And so that's what it is. From the process of putting it together, certainly the ministers of the government, they know the things that they are going to be able to bring up to be considered during that legislative session. In previous years, certainly we've had interaction from members of our parliamentary caucus to add levels of priority to make sure that things can actually be there, which may not have been a priority item for ministers in that year. We tried to execute our entire platform in the 5 years, but in any given years, there's only a certain amount of things that can be done. Because in order to make a bill, persons have to draft the bill, come up with a policy, make sure it is reviewed so that it can go to Parliament successfully. So that's what a throne speech is. It is a legislative plan for the year. That doesn't mean that it is the only thing that the government will do during the year, because there are so many different things that we do on any day-to-day basis that do not require going to Parliament and changing laws.
The last time that we did a town hall, we were at the BTA building. It was right before the pandemic. That's how, in this day and age, you measure stuff by, was this before the pandemic or after the pandemic? But thankfully, we're not 6 feet apart. Minister, you still have your mask on. But this is exciting to be back in person again. So this is a special occasion. And in the beginning of the throne speech, you chose this quote from Dr. Howard Thurman from Meditations of the Heart, and I want to quote it. "Whatever may be the tensions and the stresses of a particular day, there is always lurking close at hand the trailing beauty of forgotten joy or unremembered peace." Why'd you choose that particular quote? Seems self-explanatory, but is that sort of the thought process when it came to all of the initiatives that you're doing as we, knock on wood, get beyond the pandemic?
I think it's important. I mean, the country's been through a lot, and change is never easy. And, when I'm up here with these two ministers who've had, it's been a difficult time. We know that the Minister of Health has had to certainly endure a significant amount of, effort, work, stress during the period of the pandemic, and certainly the difficult work of not only education reform, but also executing education reform in a time during a pandemic, ensuring that our students can continue to learn, ensuring that that system is held together and is able to be modified is certainly a lot. And so I think that all persons will want to go back to peaceful times, remember peaceful times, and go back to a time where the stresses were less. But that doesn't negate the fact that stress levels are high in the country. We have global inflation that we are dealing with. We still have, the overhang of the pandemic. There are still persons who are reeling from the challenges and changes to their personal circumstance due to unexpected loss during that period. So that quote just speaks to the fact that we have to have hope and remember that there are things that can get better, and we can look to the past to remember that.
And thank you to all of you, and even some that are not here sitting with me right now, because I felt like I saw you almost every day or every other day during that period, giving valuable information. So, Premier, I'm going to ask you your first official question, and then I'm going to rotate through. So let's start with reducing mortgage costs and increasing affordable housing. So last month you launched a Build Mortgage Guarantee Initiative in partnership with the Bermuda Commercial Bank. In basic terms, can you tell us about that program and who it will benefit?
Thank you, Kian. For this, one of the things that the government has laid out, and this was even before the 2017 election, cost of living in Bermuda has always been the biggest issue in this country. And it's certainly not limited, but it's certainly most felt by the working persons in this country, those persons who, make most of their money or just about all their money through their labor and their work in their day-to-day jobs. And for the Mortgage Guarantee Program, one of the things and the challenges that we have is that Bermuda's mortgage rates are far higher than comparable mortgage rates in other jurisdictions. And from that perspective, what we said is that we are going to put the power of the government to assist in helping to lower mortgage rates. Now, this is a pilot program. The amount of persons that it is expected to assist is only around 250. But these are 250 new homeowners who may not have been able to get on the housing ladder as quickly as they would have without this program. Now, the first phase of it is open to new home buyers, persons who do not own property and are looking to get on the ladder. And since this has been introduced, where we're looking at reducing down payments by half, because down payments are typically 20%. At some banks are 30, but they're going down to 10% under this program. And also with the perspective of having a lower interest rate, which is now at 5%, whereas mortgage rates are typically 7 or a little bit higher, then this means lower payments for these persons as well. So we're talking about people saving $400 to $500 a month. And so this is the first phase. As we finish this, they'll be able to roll over to people who want to transfer their mortgages. One of the things that we did in the legislature last year, that is the Parliament, we passed a law that made sure that there is no stamp duty on the transfer of mortgages. So as we try to get more competitive, that means that persons don't have to pay taxes for any transferring of mortgages. And so this is something that is all a part of what we do. It's not necessarily big initiatives that matter oftentimes. Sometimes it's many smaller initiatives that help pockets of persons who need help and assistance. And the feedback has been incredible from those persons who are halfway to saving for that 20% down payment, and now all of a sudden can go ahead and get on the housing ladder. So that is something that I'm proud of the work that was done at the Ministry of Finance to deliver that, and it's certainly something that is going to benefit the society. But when we look forward, the question is, what is next? Because there are many persons here who are not first-time home buyers but are struggling under the weight of mortgages. And what is brilliant about Bermuda is that we have international companies here that are some of the best mortgage risk providers for the United States. So those big companies on Pitts Bay Road are using their knowledge to reduce mortgage rates in the United States. And so the second phase of this program, which is being undertaken by the Ministry of Finance, working with all the banks and our international insurance companies, is to make sure that we can deploy those type of things here in Bermuda to see an overall reduction in mortgage rates in the country. Because the time when mortgage rates are increasing, that is certainly something that is going to be needed to make sure to help and assist Bermudians.
All right, helping everyone get a piece of the rock. So we're going to shift over to health. Minister Wilson, this is something that I'm very interested in, and it's the first 1,000 days. So you can do the calculations, 365 in a year, that's the first 3 years of life?
Two. It includes gestation.
Okay, gestation, okay. So the program is the first 1,000 days. So what is this program in a high level?
Thank you, Keenan, for that question. I suspect that the majority of people in this room are parents and or grandparents. Yeah, I know that. You mentioned that's why you were late this evening.
That's why I came in at the last second.
Exactly. So this initiative from the government is critically important for the development of the first 2 years of life. Again, it includes the gestation period and then the first 2 years of life, hence the first 1,000 days. And what that will include, it will build upon an existing program that we have with respect to the health department, where nurses go and visit mothers at different touch points, 6-month checkup, et cetera, et cetera. However, what we're finding, and we recognize that those first 1,000 days of a child's life are incredibly important for their development, for their brain development, and so forth. It's also important because it will also provide them with a great basis for the future and their future well-being. So part of this will be the development of a pathway, effectively a patient pathway, monitoring the mother throughout those first 1,000 days to see if there's any gaps in the system as it relates to perhaps services and so forth, so that we can close those gaps. But this patient pathway will help to map what the mother's encounters from the moment she finds out that she's pregnant, the doctor's visits and so forth. So it's a really incredibly important initiative. I'm sure everybody will agree that the children are our future, and we're trying to build on programs that already exist with respect to the Department of Health. One of the parts of that initiative will also include prenatal checkups. So therefore, there'll be a requirement, not a requirement, but the health visitor will come and visit with mothers that are pregnant. Persons might recall a couple of years ago when we made amendments to the SPR, we also included benefits for persons that were underinsured or uninsured mothers, so that they could have a good start to life as well with themselves and their children. So that builds on initiatives that this government has already advanced. And in addition to that, in 2019, when we made legislative amendments to include paternity leave, as well as increase and enhance the maternity leave. So these are just steps that we're using to build on the fact that we recognize it's incredibly important for the child and the mother to have the best start at life.
The best years of life. I got a 1-year-old right now, and she is living the life in her first 1,000 days. The important question that everyone wants to ask when it comes to this and any initiative is how will this be financed?
That's a very important question. We already have the Department of Health, so much of this initiative will be run by the Department of Health. Fortunately, COVID is on the back end, so we will see some of the health officers and the nurses within the community, as well as physio and occupational therapies that work within the health ministry will help to continue to drive this. And then with respect to the mapping of the pathway that I spoke about, that will be included in this budget already, the budget we're in the current budget year, because that's part of our health reform, and we've contracted, as I've publicly announced, KPMG, and they'll be doing the mapping of this first 1,000 days.
Okay, exciting stuff happening within your ministry, and I look forward to asking about the new hospital program in just a bit. But we're going to jump over to the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rubin, and the redesigning models of learning, teaching, and schooling, the parish primary schools, signature schools. We've heard all of these buzzwords. And, the first question when it comes to all of this, redesigning of the school system in September 2022. So this is very recently. We saw signature senior schools featuring signature learning programs open at the Barclay Institute, I have to say that right, and Cedar Bridge Academy. So, Minister of Education, this marked a new chapter in education reform. So can you tell us about how things have been since the launch of the signature learning programs?
Well, thank you, Keen, and I hope there are some people here that were there to help us welcome our students in. We did something different this year, and we had community members, parents, the teachers, and everyone, and we invited everyone that had helped us to develop this over the last 30 months to actually welcome our students into the schools. And so the hallways were lined and people were clapping and cheering as our students walked in. So it was a significant thing to get them to understand that they are going into something completely different from everyone else. We got questions back from students who were in S2 and up. Was like, how come we didn't get this when we came? And so it's something that we want to continue on that tradition. So for those who are unaware, that we introduced 2 signatures at each one of these schools, finance and insurance services at the Barclay Institute, and health and social services. And at Cedar Bridge, we introduced STEM, and of course the one that everyone was excited about, trades and business services. So we've been getting good feedback. We've been monitoring what's been going on there, and we continue to develop that curriculum as well as future curriculums as we move forward. We've gotten good monitoring of what's going on within the school system, and we should be looking to come up with some more videos. We will be going into the classroom, recording what's happening in the classroom, and putting out some of that information for persons to see, so they can see exactly what's going on inside of those classrooms.
Okay, and it's been highlighted that signature learning programs focus on authentic, real-world, hands-on learning experiences. And so what are some of the things that we can expect students to experience within these programs?
Well, the purpose of the signature programs is it takes up 30% of our students' academic career while they're in school. So 70% will be spent on the traditional math, English, social science, and science, and the rest of the curriculum. So 30% of the time will be spent in the signature. And the idea of the signature schools is that when our children leave our schools, they not only have a diploma that says they've graduated from high school, but they also have things like micro-credentials, international certifications, internships under their belts, potential apprenticeships. They'll have experiences in the particular fields that they have been studying in that'll give them the opportunity to either enter into the working world directly or be more enhanced as they go on to tertiary education. So the idea is that our children leave our schools without trying to figure out what it is that I want to do. When they leave, they already have exposure to those types of things while they're in school. And I think it's critically important for us because one of the questions we kept getting asked was, well, what if my child goes to one school and they don't like it and they want to go to something else? That is still an option that is there. We have a transfer option that exists now. They'll be able to transfer from the Berkeley to Cedar Bridge. As we move this forward more, we are looking at the ability for students to be at one school and actually do a major signature at one school and a minor signature at another school. And so we're looking to, that'll be introduced by technology or actually getting, providing transportation to go between school to school. But as it stands now, once you go to the Berkeley Institute, you'll be doing either of those two signatures, and the same with Cedar Bridge Academy. When you do transfer, you will still get the benefit of that signature, but you will not get the full 4 years. Because unlike college, we can't hold you back a year or 2 years just because you want to get the rest of those two. But the credits you get at the previous school will transfer over and you'll still be able to graduate on time. You just may not get the full exposure of that signature as you would if you were there for the entire 4 years now, but eventually 5 years.
So huge transformations within the senior level. And of course, in March 2022, this year, you announced also that the necessary work was also underway to open the first parish primary schools.
Yes.
In September 2023. So after this year, we're going to see the first of that. Can you give us an update on where the ministry stands with this?
Yes. To bring people who may not know, the two parish primary schools that we've selected, Purvis Primary and Francis Patton. And currently the teams are busy working, getting that information together. The system transformation teams are busy doing the work that is necessary for us to be able to get to those parish primary schools. We've been doing quite a bit of work over the summer and in September. Some of you who have been out there would have seen us in the field because part of this redevelopment is what we call co-design. It's critically important for us to have the feedback from the public and our educators and our parents and our community partners to say what it is that they want our children to learn while we push forward and say this is how we can get that done. And so we've been in the field and we've been talking to people and accepting those recommendations. The teams at Purvis, the teams at Francis Patton have been very, very hard at work. And a big shout out to Principal Cox and Principal Jacobs at Purvis, Principal Cox at Francis Patton, and they're phenomenal teams that they have been working on this. We've started, we'll continue to work in January. It's where they start to develop the curriculum, the curriculum that will be in the schools. And I believe it's around February, March, where we will start talking to the teachers and getting them ready for how those schools would be. There's also a bit of infrastructure that needs to happen in those schools because in September 2023, we will begin with P1 and P7. In 2024, we'll have P3 and P8. In 2025, we'll have P4 and P5, and that's how we'll continue to move that along. So we're preparing for P1 and P7 to be introduced in September 2023, and we are on track.
All right, thank you very much for that update. Education is so important, and we have to get that piece right. So good luck with all of that work that you're doing. And we're going to shift gears again. Is anyone here interested in the cost of living and what we're going to do to address that? Yes? I suspect 100% of us. And so, Premier, Within the throne speech, I know even before I ask this question, this is just unprecedented where you see a rate of inflation as high as it's become. You see Federal Reserves throwing everything at the fire to try and put it out. And so this is a top agenda for not only Bermuda, but countries around the world that are really trying to get a hold of this cost of living, because it really does affect all of us. And so within the throne speech, Premier, you said that it is the government's responsibility, and rightfully so, to aid in the easing of the tensions and stresses of this unprecedented age. I think the last time that we saw this rise was back in the 70s. I wasn't around, I just heard about it. So can you tell us about what you're doing to help with the cost of living?
Well, Kean, I was about to say, I was like, it might be unprecedented for us, but for some persons who, live through a different age, 9% inflation seems wild for us. But there were times when it was 15 and 16%, and we wonder, how persons made it through that period. But certainly, the cost of living in Bermuda was high before this level of global inflation, which has come from, the twin aspects of the supply chain challenges which we face from the pandemic, and then also Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the resulting spike in energy prices of which we're seeing, and the pain of which that causes, and the way in which that filters through the overall economy. For us, our impact or our view has been to assist as many persons as we can, as much as we can, throughout the economy. And so from that perspective, we've put in a number of various things. In February, we know that we froze prices at the pump. And so in the summer, when we were hearing persons talking about record energy prices around the world, record gas prices around the world, there were not record gas prices here in Bermuda. And with the funds that came in, the additional funds that came in from the travel authorization, from better than expected tourism revenue, with a better than expected tourism season, we certainly exceeded our expectations significantly in this current tourism season. That additional funds, rather than keeping those funds, the government said that we were going to stay true to the promise that we made in the budget and look to return some of those funds back to taxpayers. And I think that is something that is important. The money that is paid by taxpayers is taxpayers' money, and if we have the ability to return some of that money, we will do so. So we did that in the form of payroll tax rebates for those persons who are making under $96,000 a year. We did that in school vouchers and help for students in public schools, parents of public school students, so they can have additional assistance there. You would have seen that we are finalizing the provision of LED light bulbs so we can give away. We had to go through a procurement process. It is important because I know that I don't want anyone to say, oh, the Premier just went to his friends and got these things. It was an open procurement process to ensure that we went through that particular situation. And at the same point in time, you've seen us reduce duty on essential goods. This is the second time that this government has reduced duty on essential goods. We reduced duty before, and the Cost of Living Commission, which is chaired by MP Derek Burgess, did work with the grocery stores to make sure that in that basket, at least at every point in time you go into a grocery store, one of the 4 major grocers, in that basket will be something that will have at least a 10% reduction. And we know that the supermarkets are going to be competing to try to bring that cost down even further. And when we see costs that are changing, costs will flow through. It is going to certainly, when we're seeing lower energy costs, because I think it's important to remember that electricity costs in supermarkets will also affect prices. Now in October, electricity costs, the fuel adjustment rate did go down by 15%. As gas prices continue to stabilize a little bit, there'll continue to be some more relief there. But that is the space where we're working. But I'm not going to try to pretend that we are going to be able to make as much of an impact as people want. Things are tight. They are tight from the government perspective, where there were unprecedented amounts of funds that were borrowed during the pandemic. $200 million had to be borrowed to cover Morgan's Point. We know that we've had to pay over $40 million in guarantees to the airport. There's a significant amount of stress and pressures on the government's budget. So at the same point in time, we're trying to aid and help persons as much as we can. But the most fundamental help of which we can give is tax reform for working persons. We have lowered the tax burden on working persons since we've come into government, and someone who's making, an average Bermuda Industrial Union salary over the time of which we've been in office have paid $5,000 less in taxes alone. When we talk about the modification of the social insurance system, that is to make sure that working people pay less, which is similar in other jurisdictions. And there needs to be greater reductions in taxes for working persons to make sure that persons have more money in their pockets so that they can ease the burnens on their day-to-day lives.
I flinch when I go to the grocery store.
I do too.
Will government offer any other relief packages? Winter is coming to families and seniors during this upcoming winter season.
It remains to be seen. We are certainly in December 2nd in the House of Assembly. We will be giving a mid-year update. We're going through that right now in the Ministry of Finance, looking to see where we are insofar as our budgets. But I think the most important thing to recognize is that this government wants to make sure that we maintain fiscal responsibility. And fiscal responsibility means that we have to maintain our budget targets. It will not be any short-term help. For instance, if we say our budget deficit was supposed to be this much this year, because it's important to remember that Bermuda's government is still in a deficit. It is vital, and we're not going to make it to a balanced budget for another 2 years. But it will be bad public policy and financial policy if we were to exacerbate the amount of money which we're borrowing now. We're still borrowing more than most persons would want to in order to provide that relief. So it is important that we maintain our budget targets to make sure that Bermuda's debt doesn't get downgraded in any way, shape, or form, because a downgrade of the debt leads to increased interest costs for everyone, and so there is a delicate balance that we have. So we'll see what happens, and I'll tell everyone to stay tuned on the House of Assembly when we release the pre-budget report and give the statement on the government's finances on December 2nd.
Thank you, Premier. I'm going to go into a lightning round because we want to make sure that we have enough time for questions for you here this evening as well. I'm going to switch it over to the Minister of Health, Minister Wilson, and legislation to support data collection. So, is the government regulating co-pays?
Thank you for that question. The Premier, as you indicated, has indicated that part of the throne speech is to lay out the legislative initiatives for this particular legislative session. And what government is looking at is the collection of data as the first element as it relates to regulation of co-pays for our vulnerable citizens. Let me pause for a moment. I'm sure as a community you recognize that one of the objectives of universal health care is to ensure that persons that are underinsured and uninsured have the ability to seek medical attention when they need it in the appropriate atmosphere, in the appropriate environment at an affordable cost. And regrettably, what we are seeing is that persons, particularly again, more vulnerable that are underinsured or uninsured, are seeking treatment at the hospital, which is far too expensive for the needs in which they're serviced, that need to be serviced. So we are looking at collection of data so that we can see what the starting points are insofar as a proper analysis, so that we could look to the regulation of co-pays for the vulnerable individuals. And I provide that caveat because everyone's insurance is different. Certain insurance, depending on the provider and depending on the nature of your insurance, we're not looking to regulate co-pays with respect to that. We are looking to provide something that will assist those individuals that are particularly vulnerable and in need, that are underinsured or uninsured within our community.
Okay, and congratulations on the new rollout of system within Pearl. Pearl is the name of it, and it is using a blockchain-enabled platform.
I'm sorry, I thought you were speaking about the hospital system.
Oh, okay. So this is a different professional registration.
Yes.
So this is a different network,
Correct.
different system,
Correct.
and it uses blockchain.
Correct.
Which is something that, I remember having a conversation with the Premier maybe 3 years ago, and he was talking about this blockchain.
Right.
I think I've caught up to how it all works. But what is the benefit of moving to a blockchain-enabled platform?
Thank you. Right now, all of the medical professional registrations, and there's about 28 of them. So if you think of every medical professional entity, they have a particular board and they have to go through registration. And the registration is controlled through the Bermuda Health Council. And believe it or not, it's still paper-based. So for example, if you're registering, you have to provide your continuing education requirements, your certificate of status, a number of documents, and they have to be filed on a regular basis. By moving to a blockchain mechanism, they'll all be filed in one particular server that is confidential. Each professional will have what's called a wallet, and their wallet will have all of the details of their registration, et cetera. So A, they only have to do it once. Once that information is uploaded and it is a secure server, they only have to do that once. And B, a lot of these boards have to approve applications for other persons joining their profession. So for example, let's say the optometrist, I'm just using that as an illustration. If somebody wants to register to be a member of the optometrist, then they actually have to submit their application, et cetera. And they literally, on many of these boards, take the application around to the members of the board to look at it and to approve that application. By doing it in the blockchain, not only will we have efficiencies of scale, but it will obviously be far more confidential, because again, some people are still filing documents by paper. So it's a efficiency saving, confidentiality, and we're using technology to help to drive that particular system.
And I know when it comes to healthcare, a lot of the costs and the resources and the time revolves around paper and administration. So moving to this blockchain-enabled platform is definitely going to be more efficient.
Correct.
And it's moving into the modern times that we are. So
Correct.
Looking forward to more updates when it comes to that.
We're saving trees.
Absolutely. So, Minister Rabin, the Education Authority. So we have a Tourism Authority, and we're going to move to an Education Authority. So what do you look to accomplish through the formation of this Education Authority?
And thank you for that, Ken. The term Education Authority has actually been around since our Plan 2022 that was enacted back in 2018, when it spoke to the necessary need, the need to increase accountability and to remove any sort of external interference, i.e. if the minister changed, the direction of education could change. When I came into this ministry in 2017, the previous government had 4 ministers in 4.5 years. And the number of reports that each one of those ministers did are just stacked on my desk and never been implemented, because they came and they wanted to do something different. And they listened to whoever they listened to. They said, this is the direction we should go. And then the one would leave and come and then say, no, we want to go in a different direction. Education has seemingly always suffered from that fate, and you'll hear it. Most people will claim, when we talk about it in the House of Assembly, or you will hear it's an easy target for political parties to make jabs at. And so the creation of an education authority then puts the education and the direction and the strategic plan of education into an authority that operates at arm's length from government. The idea is to create a quango that will be staffed by or led by not only just educational professionals, but persons who are also capable of running companies or business, because you actually need to have that in place as well. And so when the question is asked, when people always say independent education authority, and I've always challenged people to actually find where they've actually heard me say that. I've never said independent. That's something that's always put in my mouth. The fact that an independent authority is one that operates on its own, generates its own funding. An education authority will not be able to do that. They will always be funded by the government. So there will always be that tie where they'll have to file proper audits of what it is that they're doing with their funding. There's no intention, and there's no intention for there to be any direct involvement of the government in how the education authority runs. And the legislation that we want to put in place will actually create that barrier. And so we're looking at a entity that will run education, filled with, and the Department of Education, all of the operations will move to that entity. The ability of that entity to be unencumbered by some of the bureaucracy that happens to be within, operating within the government sphere will actually be removed. And we will have a more we will see a more efficient running of education. We also want to create more autonomy within our school systems and create a more nurturing environment where it's a more bottoms-up approach to how our schools operate versus what some people would say now is really a top-down approach. You have a few people at the top that are saying, do this, and you have the people that are on the ground saying, okay, how do we get this done? If you were here, you'd see it doesn't actually work here as it does there. So when we talk about autonomy within our school system, one of the things that we've recognized is the inequality, or it's not equitable across how we actually fund our schools. So we'll get persons who will say, but what about this school? It's operating really great. And what about, and this school is not. But when you look at how the schools operate, all of them are given the same resources, but that's not equitable because some of our schools require different resources than other schools. And so if we continue along this path, we'll always continue to have this separation between our school systems. And if we want to build a system that's nurturing, a system that works together, a system that looks at what is happening at one particular school that's operating well and sharing that with other schools so they can actually look at how we can incorporate some of those things. This is the ways that we're seeing of getting to that point, of creating a system where the children that are in the schools are getting the resources and getting everything that they need in order to be successful. And that is the key to the revamping of our system and creating this education authority.
Thank you very much. And if you look, audience, we have some microphones that are now being set up. I have lots more questions that I could spend time asking, but we definitely want to afford you the opportunity to ask questions as well. So right now we're going to change gears a bit, and if there's anyone in the audience, we've been talking about everything from the economy to healthcare to education, and you know, if any of these things have piqued your interest in diving a little deeper, then please feel free to stand up and approach the microphone and ask your questions away. So one question at a time, and let's try to keep it to about 2 minutes to ask the question so that everyone can have a fair shot at having the opportunity. Sure.
Good evening. Sarah Lagan from the Royal Gazette. Question for you, Premier. You had mentioned, or it had been mentioned in the throne speech about a report on self-governance, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that report and let us know when it might be made public.
Certainly, the Attorney General will be speaking about that in the House of Assembly on Friday. And the one thing that I'm not going to do is get in the way of one of my cabinet ministers. But as I said when those questions were asked to me by a reporter from your organization, I said very clearly that, of course, the report will be made public.
So no more on that?
I will not preempt what the Attorney General will announce in the House of Assembly on Friday.
Okay, and a question for you, Mr. Rebane.
Yes.
In terms of education, we have been asking for a little while at the Royal Gazette for the Cambridge results, the exam results, and we're just wondering if that's something you were looking to, again, make public.
That's actually an interesting question, and thank you. When I did reach out to the Department of Education, and when you ask for the Cambridge results, the only results that we do give out, that we used to give out, are the IGCSE results. As all of our educators know, and all of our parents and students know, in order for our students to graduate from high school, they are required to have a pass in math, English, science, and social services. And they are also able to take additional IGCSEs if they wish. This particular year, and it was something that was reported by your newspaper, we had a very large group of graduating high school students this year, and we are very proud to say that the bulk of them were males, were young males that graduated this year. So the mere fact that we did have a record number of graduates and a record number of males graduating indicates that all of them passed their math, English, science, and social services, social sciences IGCSEs as a requirement for graduation. So that in itself is an indication of how well our students did in the past year. And so I'm not sure if you need any more information than that, but that is the indication that they have been they did very well in their exams this year.
Okay, and just on to education reform. Is there any more information you could give us about how much that is going to cost to implement at this stage?
Education
Education reform, so the infrastructure for the primary schools, the
Yes,
costs aren't for government.
yes. And thank you for that. We have promised the Bermudian public that we will publish a plan of what it would look like to get from where we are now to where we need to go. We did say that we're waiting for some reports to come in. We've got a report being done by KPMG and a report being done by a subsidiary of KPMG that's actually looking into the buildings. We have those preliminary reports. You would be well aware that we did have a sort of shuffle in our ministry of permanent secretaries. Thank you, Permanent Secretary Jasmine Smith, who's here today. And she's busy getting up to speed on some of those things. And so once we do get those final reports, we will be in a better position to publish that scheme, and that will give us what it will look like in the transformation of education over the next 5 to 10 years. And including in that will be some looks at what type of costs we're looking at to get there.
Can you say how much has been spent so far to date?
What is that?
Can you say how much has been spent so far to date?
Well, I would say send us that question, and we'll be able to get that information for you exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone else want to take the opportunity? Sure.
Afternoon, everybody. We can start. This question and concern is addressed to the Education Minister. I fully support education reform. It's my true belief that education reform is what is truly in the future going to lower the cost of living in Bermuda. And if anybody knows obviously anything about Bermuda's economy, that's what we have, us, our workforce. Mm-hmm. So in diversifying the economy and lowering the cost of living, 100% I agree with this education reform. The concern that I have, though, is the safety of our students. The reason why I have this concern is because my child started Cedar Bridge, and something's wrong with this mic, I don't know if it's me, but my child started Cedar Bridge in September this year. Within, I would say, I have probably seen about or heard from her and her friends at least 5 major red flags. Thank you. Thank you. These red flags include the 100 or so person melee in the beginning of September, where the school was on lockdown for 3 hours. I don't know if the police were called. It's unknown at this time. The various numerous incidences of fights daily at this school. The amount of violence that is going on right now is unprecedented at Cedar Bridge. On Wednesday, I got a text from a friend of my daughter to tell me that my daughter was attacked by another male student that is her age. As a father myself, I had to take a back seat and think before I went to the school. And I was also, it was then that many other things were put before me. There are a significant lack of teachers for core subjects. I don't know how our children or how any of this education reform is supposed to be implemented if we're starting off with no teachers. Secondly, I was told by people that work there and are affiliated with the school that within the last 2 weeks, there's been 15 or so teachers either absent for many reasons or not at school. And also this lack of teachers has also led to this upsurge in violence where there's also the amount of unprecedented things going on because children are roaming the school without supervision because there's no one there to supervise them. I'm also told by my daughter when I look at her report card and I'm asking questions about subject matter that she has, and I note that the subjects that she has a constant, stable teacher, she has A's. all of the other subjects that she has substitutes in. I believe one class, biology, we got up to 6 when she was naming the names of the teachers, the substitutes that have been there. She told me that a paper is handed out when she walks into class. They take the paper and sit down and do the worksheet. That's why she has never been taught. So my question is, Mr. Minister, I'm on your side because I believe in public education and I need my children to be educated because I don't have the money to afford private school for my 5 children. So, sir, what are we going to do about this immediately as a priority?
First of all, I want to empathize with you. I have a daughter in the public school system as well, and security is definitely something that I do empathize with. If your daughter was attacked, I expect that the school has done what they need to do to take care of that. There is security at the school for that. Interestingly, it was just last Thursday afternoon we held a meeting with the Cedar Bridge, the entire Cedar Bridge staff, to discuss some of the exact same questions that you are referring to. Some of them I did not know that we were having in such that we had such gaps there, because that falls under the remit of the Department of Education. So that doesn't normally bubble to me on a consistent basis. This is something that we'll have to take a look at too. There was nothing that was spoken to us about the number of teachers being present. In fact, I believe it was when we spoke to them and the principal were there and the deputy principals, it was they were talking about 2 teachers that they had gaps with, not as many as you said. But it is something that we'll have to take back and really discuss. The addressing of violence within our schools, and it's not just Cedar Bridge, it's all of our schools. It's all of our schools. It's, you know, it's easy for us to say that it is a society problem because it is, but we do have, you should be confident that when you're sending your children to our schools, they are in a safe environment, and I take that under serious consideration, and it's something that we will be looking into as we move forward. The Cabinet is aware of this, and we have a committee called the Social Development Committee that's looking specifically at the types of things that you're talking about, not just at the school level, but at a society level. I see my good my ministerial colleague, Michael Weeks here. He sits on that committee as well. We're talking about how we can tackle gang violence. What are the things that we can do differently within our school system? And one of the things that have come out, especially from the conversations we have had over the years, is that we need to have different ways of dealing with that small minority of student that's within our system that is causing these problems. And that is something that we are looking to address immediately, of how we can handle that minority of student, because it's not everyone. It is a minority of students. It's not all of them, but it is a minority of student, and we have to figure out how we can deal with them in a different way than what we've been dealing with them before. Suspension and sending them home to an unstable, in some cases, a further unstable environment is not working. You know, but to having those interventions in the school when they need to be actually removed and have more intensive interventions at another location is something that needs to come into play, and it's something that we're definitely looking to put in place in a very short order. So with that, I thank you for supporting public education, and you know, and I'm looking forward to us being able to have further conversation on these.
Thank you for your comments, but I just want to note that unless these things are addressed immediately, this conversation about freedom of speech and reform in education, it just becomes political football like everything else. That's all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If I could just say something, Calvin, thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you for your passion. For those of you who don't know, Calvin and I went to school together. And I accept the same thing of what you're saying, because you are correct. These are things that need to be addressed. And as the minister had said, when these things came to our attention, after school went in, there were emergency cabinet sessions that were held, These are the meetings that are taking place. We do know that there's been upgrades to security that have been made at Cedar Bridge. There's been specific questions that have been asked the Minister of Education to follow up with, specific actions that have been asked the chairman of the board at the Cedar Bridge Academy, and certainly I'm grateful for you for sharing your experience. But what I'm also grateful for is that you support education reform, because it is vital that we make sure this happens. So I certainly accept what you were saying, and there are things that need to be tightened up, so it's important that we do so.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening, Trevor.
Good evening. Trevor Lindsay, TNN News. I am representing my Somerset village. I've been up in Somerset for the last 4 years. Come January, my children go to Somerset Primary, but I want to know, when are you, Education Minister Premier, are you going to come to address the Somerset community about the West End Somerset Primary issue? That environment I found is a family-oriented environment. I love it up in Somerset. I don't like the traffic driving down in the morning, but there's a lot of uncertainty about the issue with Somerset Primary and West End Primary. When are you going to come up and address that matter?
And I thank you for that question, Trevor. When it comes, for those who have not been initiated, we have a plan in place to introduce parish primary schools. And earlier we talked about Purvis, we talked about Francis Patton. And the idea behind the parish primary school is that a school is in every parish, with 2 in Pembroke, that becomes the hub of the community. That becomes a school that the entire parish can rally around, uplift, and as we move forward. To give you some of the some background data of what we did as we looked at this. In 1998, there were just under 8,000 students in our school system and just around 700 educators. In 2022, we have just under 4,200 students in our entire system and just under 1,000 educators. And so it is unsustainable for us to continue to have schools, and to have schools as many as we do have, and be able to get our students the type of education that they deserve and the type of resources that they deserve. So the decision was looked at, and we looked at what the projections are going to be looking forward for the next 10 years in terms of our students. And so the decision was made that we did need to seriously take a look around at what it is that we needed to do in terms of being able to provide our children with the opportunities that they deserve moving forward. To answer the question directly for Trevor, I can't remember I can't see where he went, is when we announced this, we held a consultative period, and we actually did add on additional consultation periods with a few areas, one of them being St. George's, one of them being Sands. We actually had 4 additional, and talked about what it is we were doing, what is the plan, and how we came about with that particular plan. And so we have addressed it. It's not that we have not discussed it. It's not that we haven't. Not that we don't. We're afraid to discuss it, and we will be coming around to discuss this as we move forward with the plan, and as we continue to move forward with what it is that we're doing. These decisions are not easy decisions. I recognize and I understand I recognize and understand some of the background that goes into some of the angst that we do have around this, and I empathize with that. I completely get it. But what I do also understand is, at the forefront of the decisions that we're making always remains the child and what is best for our children as we move forward. And so we have to figure out a way to balance what's best for our children moving forward and what is acceptable for the adults. And so that is, we will continue to balance that out as we continue to move forward. But I have no issue coming and speaking to anyone. And I've said this numerous times. I will speak to everyone individually or in groups about what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing.
Can you also clarify the information within the media and in the community that your intentions is to close West End and rename Somerset Primary? Can you clarify that for us?
I can certainly clarify that. Unfortunately, those words were misconstrued. However, during our consultation process that we had, that topic came up, and it was actually suggested by some persons who lived in Somerset was like, well, why don't you consider doing this? And so that was one of the things that I mentioned in the last press conference that I had, that was one of the suggestions. What we did, Trevor, and I don't believe you were on any of the sessions because they did happen a couple of years ago, is we took a evaluation process that was put together by persons who are much more knowledgeable about these things than I am. And what they did is they evaluated every single campus or property that held a school in Bermuda. And that school, and that was then graded. And so whatever property within the parish had the highest grade was the one that was selected, because what we want to do is redevelop and build a new school. So when persons say that we're changing names of Somerset Primary and stuff, Somerset Primary, as we know it, will not exist in the future plans. There will be something different there. And we will give the community the opportunity to say, what is it that you want out of that school that's going to be there because it's for you, the community? What is it that you want that school to be called? What is the types of things you want that school to actually have in it? And so those are the things that we're talking about. So when I talked about that, that was something that actually was a comment that came from the group to us. And so if you look at the report, you'll see that's one of the recommendations that came from the community.
Thank you, Trevor.
I just wanted, I'm going to start with a quote from Mrs. Nate Simmons' article. She's done excellent ones in the paper. History is important and molds who we are. It's not a minor detail. Both my grandparents, two of my grandparents went to West End Primary. My father, Dr. Glenn Bascom, went to West End Primary. I went to West End Primary, and both my daughters currently go to West End Primary. One question, I think I heard you say this in a video, that it was a red herring, this idea of the name of the school change. And if you could just explain what you mean by that term, red herring, because it makes it sound like it's a small issue. It's not a small issue. There are my ancestors whose feet were not allowed to step into Somerset Primary's grounds. Furthermore, there was an assessment done. Assessment is only as good. Data collection is only as good as the question asked. As far as my understanding, there was no question related to cultural heritage of the school. There was no, you can correct me, were there questions related to cultural heritage and importance to the community in these questions where these grades were given to the different campuses?
First
Were there, I'm just asking a simple, I could be incorrect. Were there questions related to those issues? It's just a yes or no question. I could be misinformed, and I would like to be informed well.
Historical reverence was not one of the criteria.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was in terms of location, because I know that there was, my understanding is there were several people that evaluated each campus. I don't know if there were people from each community in the campus, because anyone who's born and raised in Somerset knows that West End Primary, along with Allen Temple, along with Somerset Cricket Club, are the cultural hub of the black community in Somerset. And I don't know if people with that understanding were on the committee. So my next question was ease of accessibility. School buses cannot get onto Somerset Primary's campus. So was proximity and where it's located in the community, was that part of the questions? I'm just asking. I could be misinformed, and if I am, I would love to know that. Were they part of the questions, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, and did Somerset Primary score much higher on that? And if so, how? And you've said that you've been over this and looked at it a lot, so I assume that you have the answers to these questions.
I can say the answers to those questions, all of that is on the website. That report,
Okay.
That report is still there, and it actually does
Fair
list.
enough.
If you allow me to finish, please. All of it lists what the criteria was and what the scores were for all of those criteria. It's right there for the public. That also lists every single response, and I believe it was between 400 and 500. So you can see every single response that we did get from our consultative process.
Thank you. So could you explain what you meant by the term of a red herring, this idea of the community? I don't know what you meant by that term, red herring, and if you would explain what you meant by that. With those of us who are here to support West End tonight, please just stand so that we can see who we are, who are here to support. if you could just let us know what you meant by the term it's a red herring. I don't know, I'm not sure what you meant by that term. If you would explain that, I would greatly appreciate it.
The term red herring, and that was,
I know what the term red herring means. I'm asking what you meant by it in that context.
it was a response to a question that the reporter asked. I would have to actually go back and see exactly what the reporter had asked, but it was a response to what the reporter had asked.
He was asking about the idea of the name of the school changing from Somerset Primary to West End, and you said it was just the campus evaluated, and a name change could happen. You were referring in those lines. I don't know if that helps you to remember what you meant by that term, which was quite dismissive in case you didn't know that.
I do apologize if you thought it was dismissive. It wasn't meant to be in any way, shape, or form, because what I do recognize is that this is a very difficult decision, and it's a very difficult topic to talk about. And when I did respond to that is when we held our consultation period, there were persons who were very much in favor of what was proposed. And so when I say red herring, it was portrayed by him that every single person in Somerset was opposed to what it is that we were saying. And I said,
the term red herring means a minor issue being made out of something that's minor, and people are making a big issue out of it. That's what the term red herring means. It means a distraction, and I don't think any of this is a
I respectfully disagree with that, but we can agree to.
You just agree that that's what the term red herring means?
Okay. Excuse me. I don't want to do this, but we are winding down in time, so we have about 10 minutes left, so I apologize. Thank you for your questions. And certainly thank you to the supporters of the West End School. So with 10 minutes left, we're going to allow for a couple more questions, and then we're going to allow time for two more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Bermuda is another world.
It is.
Yes? We are. Yes, it is. This is paradise. But our paradise has been sold off from us. Okay? Health Minister, during this time, in these last few years, you're sitting up here now and you're talking about our kids' future, concerned about our kids' future. But let's go back to the whole COVID pandemic, right? When at the end of the day, masks were not required for kids. You're wearing a mask now, you're just depriving yourself of oxygen. There's nothing in this room that if it was as small as that can't get through that mask. I love the theatrics of it, but it's not necessary. You're amongst your people. Now, you're talking about our kids' future, but here we are being allowed that you're going to vaccinate from babies up. None of them need it. It is enough information out there that speaks to the fact that no kid is even going to die from COVID in these last years unless they had a very poor morbidity in them already. Okay? Mr. Premier, our country, we're being sold out all over the place. You talk about sustaining our island, sustaining our future. From 2019, we should have been thinking about if all those ships stop coming from America, how will this island survive? We are 8 weeks out. If these ships stop, on top of that, you're talking about the marketplace in these places and the high food prices. But yet they're getting the lowest grade food from the United States by charging us premium prices for these low grade food. Back to the health minister. You're talking about our health, but our food is so low grade that is factored in our health. We are getting food from America. It would be better off to ban it and bring it in from Europe where the standards are higher for our food that is feeding our people. It's just feeding our people poison. Going on, our golf courses laden with pesticides that you were talking about. Some of them are changing our boys into women. Okay? That's what's out there. If you look around Bermuda, the environment has changed. There used to be frogs all over this island. There used to be crabs all over this island. That is a pure indication that something is going wrong from us, right? From that, we have all these golf courses around. You want to make money. Stop playing around with this whole cannabis thing. Let it be. Grow hemp. Hemp will heal the soil. Hemp will heal us. We should be forerunners of hemp and all its development. Clothing, building products, everything. Bring Bermuda back to 1609 and let us survive without the rest of the world around us. You want to bring down building costs? Let's build it ourselves. We have sold our island out piece by piece to all these international things, and then we have to foot the bill because they didn't get what they wanted. We're left hanging. We got an airport down there we're paying millions for, but yet we are doing things to discourage the actual people coming here. Okay? Our island, we need help. Education, yes. The reason why we're having all these fights in school, there's no men in the schools. Why is there no men? Because I can't be a man teaching somebody that can grab me by my shirt and I'm just supposed to walk them to the principal's office. We all had canings in school and we survived them. Our society didn't go backwards. We weren't barbaric. We had canings and discipline. It was called discipline. That's what our schools lack, discipline. And from men. There's too many women being cuddling. Soft times create soft men. We are in a soft man time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. Keon, I think that...
So, thank you for all of that. I've been, can we, one more crack?
Can I, hold a second, can I answer the question?
Okay, so the Premier is asked to answer the question and then can we have one more 2-minute question?
That's not for me, that's for the people who are running.
Okay.
Allow me to say this, please, because I certainly recognize the passion around certain issues. But I think it's important to remember and recall that Bermuda is a democracy. On every Tuesday, I chair a meeting of the cabinet. On every Tuesday, I can promise you that the 12 people that sit around that cabinet table don't agree on everything. In a situation like this, I can tell you that people don't agree with everything. But the job of the government is to look to advance the society. Oh, absolutely. Listening, I think, hold a second, I'm speaking. If you want me to listen, then please listen to me. Because I think this is important. I think this is critically important. Because tensions run high. And I remember a discussion amongst my colleagues. Because the young man that just got up has a distinct passion around a number of issues. Part of the challenges that this country is facing is because when difficult decisions need to be made in order to advance society and make sure the next generation has a better time, we sometimes pull back. I get it. As I said, this is a government meeting, not a political meeting. But during the campaign that just happened, there is no progressive Labour Party leader that would willingly pick a fight with Somerset. That is not what the intention is. What the intention is to recognize and remember that there's been many times that there's been attempts at education reform in this country that have not succeeded. Many times, many attempts. Now, I'm not going to say that this government is perfect. I am not going to say that anyone is perfect. But the transparency of which we've had, there were questions that were posed, the minister said everything's on the website, the processes of which we follow to get to this place in this decision, and the truth is, yes, as I said, there were many times, and the minister and I spoke, and says, this decision is going to be a problem. How can we look to possibly fix it? I went to Somerset and spoke to persons. Here's the truth. If this gentleman makes a unilateral decision to switch the school, the entire 4 years that this government has invested in the education reform effort across the entirety of the school system will have to start again. That's the challenge. And see, so I get it and I understand that some persons want what is better for them. And if there is a decision that is made in this country that 99% of the persons agree with, there will be one person that is against it. If a government has to make 100 decisions, that means that 100% of the people will be angry at the government at least one time. But when we're talking about a throne speech, when we're talking about all the things of which we have to do collectively as a government, my plea is to recognize and understand. We hear you say West End Warriors. I got it. I understand. And just like I said throughout the election campaign, we recognize and understand the passion. But the challenge that this country's had is because when difficult decisions are necessary to be made, sometimes we take the politically expedient route, back up, and in the end, it is our children and next generation that suffer. And so from that perspective, I not want to focus solely on West End because the young man had said a few more things. Because he certainly spoke about the fact of the money in which we're having to pay for the airport. And he certainly spoke about the fact that we need to build more and grow more in this country. And that is precisely what it is that we're doing. The Deputy Premier who's over here, one of the conversation discussions which we had was about boosting local agriculture. Because yes, we need to be self-sufficient. When we talk about a full blue economy plan that has been rolled out to ensure that there is investment into our oceans to make sure that this country can become more self-sufficient. So that is the long-term plan and that is the long-term vision. But as we know we're supposed to end at 8, as we come towards the close, and Keen's going to ask everyone to make closing comments, this is a continuation of the journey. A journey which starts in 2017. Every single household in this country got a mailing of all the various things that this government has done, changed, modified, that have made life better for persons. And yes, I get it. Times are hard. Global inflation is real, but it's not going to stop the government from continuing to work every day to try to make things better.
Thank you.
I would just like to invite the 4 of you to Somerset for a town hall meeting in Somerset to address education.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. Say
yeah.
no more. The answer is
give
yes.
us a date. Give
the
us
answer
a date.
is yes.
Because
As
we
the minister
we
said,
definitely do need to discuss this further. It's not all about passion. It's about, I don't think you do. And this is why we need to have more of a conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
We need a time and a date. You can contact either me or any one of the West End Warriors with that information. Or I'll give you my, shall I give you my Gmail account?
Miss, we can certainly have a conversation after.
So I just want to say,
I just want to say, Premier, I'm from Warwick. I live on Southeast, where they're developing the old Surfside property. It's been a blast of inconvenience for everybody in the neighborhood. John Bush III hasn't come down to see the people and see their concerns, and it's a nightmare. When I say a nightmare, you have 3 old homes there, and 2 of the old homes, when they did the south west side of development, the drilling has damaged 2 of the homes' tanks. So you have 2 homes that have leakage. Then you have the sand up on the old Nautilus house, Mr. and Mrs. Nass's home, that's constantly filling the area with sand, and the tanks, and the roofs. So every year from late 2016 to 17 to present, every year the neighbors had to do the roofs. It's bad. You've been in the neighborhood, you've seen it. Well, you looked at the property. But it's a major concern for people in the southeast area of South Shore Ward. Major sand. Then you have the sand that blows from the southwest, major concern. Sweep up every day. So my address to you, that needs to be addressed. So you look at 18 months to 2 years to do a roof, they're doing it within that period of time. So those people need to be reimbursed for the roofs, whoever does the maintenance. You got 2 homes that need to have the tanks looked at. That's a major concern, Premier. So I've taken it to Roy Gazette, I've taken it to planning, and no one's bounced back to me.
I believe that's a compliment.
No, it's a major concern for development. So you have Cabral there doing the work.
Sir?
If I may, please, if I may. Sir, thank you for your concern.
So
Two
yeah,
things. Hold on.
I just want to put that to you. I'm done.
No, I got it. Thank you for your concern. Allow me to say 2 things. Number 1, development that happens and causes impacts for persons, that is a challenge. I know that the Deputy Premier is here. You said that you've been to planning and other places it has been resolved. What I would like to do is just offer you to have a conversation with me afterwards. I don't know if your MP is here, but what I'll do is make sure to put you in touch with him, and both the Deputy Premier is responsible. Sir, what I'm trying to do is, you have an issue. There's an issue regarding your neighbors and persons with tank damage. There's an issue in regards to the building and how it's affecting.
I'll tell you
And what
after.
I'm
She's in my
saying is that
constituency.
I'm happy to speak to you on that particular
give you her
issue
name. Hold on.
with the Deputy Premier to find out how we can get a resolution.
Pat.
Because here's what I
I'll
will
tell you.
say. If there is development that is negatively affecting, your property, that is not acceptable, and that's not what should happen. Thank you.
All right, so I wanna respectfully, we're over time. However, I just want to close before I give the opportunity for closing remarks. I just want to say the reason that I signed up for this is that I hoped that we would all be able to come together. I hope that we would have a wide representation of the community. Again, it's beautiful to see all of you here this evening. I hope that you will come with passion. And clearly you have exceeded in that regard. And also, I hope that we can all take this information and, to those of you that didn't come out tonight, hopefully we can have more of these types of forums in person. It's good to see each other face to face and exchange feelings and passion and information, because information is power. And so with that being said, I just want to start on the end, Minister of Education and then the Minister of Health and then the Premier, to just give some closing remarks and a high-level takeaway in terms of the throne speech and what you want the audience, both here and that are watching online, to take away and be energized around.
Thank you, Ken. I just want us to know that we're at a unique crossroads in terms of education here in Bermuda. We have an absolute wonderful opportunity to make a difference in the lives of not just our children, but our grandchildren as we move forward. We want to put an education system in place that will ensure that the generations to come get the education system and get the opportunities that they deserve. There are difficult decisions that have been made, and there are even more difficult decisions that are in front of us that as we continue to move forward with education. But I will always reiterate, as long as we put our children at the forefront of the decisions we make and put our own personal desires as adults to the side, we'll always make the best decisions. Those best decisions, as the Premier articulated, may not be the decision that you personally want. But I implore you to get on board. I implore you to come out to our sessions. I did hear some questions today that we've answered and we'll continue to answer, because the answers will not change. But we will continue to work with and try and get you to understand where it is that we're going with this. And if we can pull that together, we have, as I said, a phenomenal opportunity to make a huge difference in the next generation and generations to come. And so I thank you all for coming out. I empathize and I understand the passions. This is not, we held meetings in every single parish in this island. The passions were the same. I remember our Mr. Dickinson at the other end, when we talked about St. George's, the passions were there. You remember because you was on those meetings as well. The passions are there, but at the end of the day, the best decisions will always be made for our children as we move forward, and everyone is welcome to be a part of that solution as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Robert. Minister Wilson, and can we please allow the closing remarks to be heard?
Thank you, Keenan. I'll be very brief. For the last 32 months, the Ministry of Health has been dealing with a national pandemic that none of us have seen before, and God willing, we'll never see it again. I'm just thrilled that I'm going to have an opportunity to advance health initiatives, including health reform and so forth, and the initiatives that I invite you to look at in the throne speech with a very hardworking, dedicated team at the Ministry of Health, who I'm certain will assist us. And I can assure you, once you look at the initiatives, particularly as it relates to the ones under the Ministry of Health, that we are building on former initiatives that will help positively impact the lives of Bermudians. So I thank you all for coming, and I invite you to read the throne speech yourself.
Thank you, Minister Wilson. Premier Burt.
Thank you, Kian. Let me say a few things. The first thing I want to do is, of course, thank yourself for agreeing to host this evening. I want to thank the hardworking team at the Department of Communications for putting on tonight's event. They are public officers. A lot of times we like to, people in the community like to take easy shots at public officers, but it is these persons who work, whether it's the Department of Communications, whether it's CITV, people are home with their families. They are out here late at night making sure they assist us in our efforts to continue to educate the public. I would like to thank the two ministers who took their time to come and join us this evening and to engage. And certainly for persons who want to engage in conversations, I promise you that we're not running out the door. So you may certainly have those conversations, and we'll continue to engage in those conversations. What I will end where I started in speaking about what the throne speech is. The throne speech are the legislative initiatives that the government has planned for this year. The acts that we will take to Parliament to amend and change laws in this country and change the way in which things happen. But what is also important is that there are many other things of which the government will continue to do which do not require laws. And I know that everyone had an opportunity to go ahead and glance all the progress that has been made, all the changes that have been made, and the changes will continue. This change does not happen overnight. When we heard and listened to what the Minister of Education said earlier, when talking about what will happen with our signature schools, I think that it is important to recognize and understand that this is a game changer in how we approach education in this country. We are looking to build a first-class education system. When we talk about the facts of when people are coming out of school, ready for the workforce, ready to modernize, those are things which I think are important. And it's vital that all persons become involved in all aspects of that reform effort. On the issue of healthcare reform, the Minister of Health has said 32 months, the ministry has been tied down with dealing with matters related to a pandemic. And she is excited to get back to items that are related to improving healthcare access, making sure we press forward on the matters for affordable healthcare, universal healthcare, and making sure we tackle some of those barriers that are preventing persons from getting early treatment, preventative treatment, which ends up costing the system and all of us more later. So I'm grateful for her efforts over time, and I'm grateful for the matters in which she shared, because when she came into the office first, her one mission was universal health care. That was delayed, but understand, our passion for that has not been diminished. And an overall matter in regards to the throne speech, this Friday in Parliament, there is certainly going to be a number of ministerial statements where the government's going to be talking about many more initiatives that aren't necessarily legislative, but are things that this government will continue to advance on behalf of the people. So what I'd like to say from you, Kian, for everyone here in the audience, thank you for your time. For those who are watching at home through whether it's on CITV or all the social items, please continue to engage with us. Please continue to share your thoughts and perspectives. And as a country, we will continue to make sure we advance while keeping in mind the needs of the next generation. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for coming out, and have a safe night. They're not running anywhere, so if you want to ask any more questions, you're welcome to do so.